Alrighty, folks, we are back. I am back. Quarantine continues. Looking outside at the park across the street from me, which is finally closed as of today. The governor of New Jersey issued an order closing all state and county parks. And so the police have been going around to the park across the street from me, barking over loudspeakers that if you enter the park, you are subject to fine and arrest. So I'm not going to tempt fate, and I'm going to remain out of the park. Although, to be honest, I haven't set foot in that park in a while because I don't know who's breathing in what or discharging what kind of particles, and didn't feel it was worth taking the necessary risk. Although I have actually gone out a bit. I went to a Whole Foods today just because I kind of just wanted to check it out, but also because I was out of seltzer, which is the more pertinent issue. And this is a Whole Foods in Newark, New Jersey, right downtown near the just sort of main drag of Newark, if you're familiar with it. And you're not permitted to go inside Whole Foods, or at least this Whole Foods location, unless you have a mask, which I did have, and unless you're wearing gloves. And they provided gloves to you, but they didn't provide masks. So they were actually turning away people at the door who did not have masks available. I mean, it's still kind of surreal. When you're walking around, everybody inside the store has a mask. Shoppers, workers, everybody's keeping distant. Everybody's wearing these blue gloves. Um, Sometimes you just kind of pinch yourself and think, is this really happening? And it is. It's not a dream. At least I don't think it's a dream. Maybe I will wake up and life will have been but a dream. Like the row, row, row your boat song. Row, row, row your boat gently down the stream. Merrily, 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 life is but a dream. Life is but a dream. If you really think about it. And today, a dreamlike occurrence has befallen us, which is that Bernie Sanders suspended his campaign. Now, I've made the case several times that the situation or the circumstances of 2020 are substantially different than 2016. And the difference in those conditions explains why Bernie had far less of a rationale for persisting all the way through this time. Leave aside coronavirus, which is sort of like an X factor type variable. In 2016, it made all the sense in the world for Bernie to contest every primary. And I'm sorry if you've heard this spiel before, but I feel it needs to be repeated. California was the last big state to vote. It was in June, at the end of the schedule. So Bernie could, with some justification, say, look, we're doing better than usual in California, or better than typical in California compared to the rest of the country. Therefore, even though I'm at a delegate disadvantage to Hillary, if I score some kind of upset victory in California, then maybe I can narrow that gap substantially and have an argument going to the convention for why I should be the nominee. And prior to that, Bernie had a number of unexpected wins. Michigan being the preeminent example from 2016, where he was behind in every poll. The data geniuses at Nate Silver's website said he had less than a 1% chance of winning Michigan, and sure enough, he wins. But not just Michigan. You had Bernie won the Wisconsin primary. Bernie won caucuses in relatively big states like Washington, like Minnesota, like Maine. Okay, fast forward 4 years later, Bernie loses the primaries in Washington, Minnesota, Maine. Right? Bernie gets blown out in Michigan. I think the primary was effectively over after Michigan, after the primaries on March 10th. Because even though he lost big time on Super Tuesday, there was still a remote possibility that maybe he could stage some kind of comeback in the primaries the following week, most significantly Michigan, which was integral to the entire logic for his candidacy. Because we all thought, rightly, that Hillary's weakness in the Midwest doomed her chances in the general election. She lost in the Midwest to Bernie for the most part, or she underperformed. Even in 2016, Bernie only narrowly lost the Illinois primary, so he overperformed in Illinois. 2020, he gets blown out. Wisconsin yesterday, clearly the Bernie campaign didn't feel particularly good about, because he suspended his campaign before the results even came in. Supposedly we're not going to get the full Wisconsin results until Friday, but it doesn't particularly matter because Biden's lead had gone way up and he's almost certain to have won with Wisconsin. Otherwise, Bernie wouldn't have dropped out. So when I listen to Bernie's stated rationale for continuing, I think to myself, okay, if I'm Bernie, or even if I'm somebody who wants Bernie to have maximal leverage or influence, I see the rationale of 2016 in him contesting every primary and going to the convention, or at least maintaining an active campaign presence up until the convention, because it allowed him to build a national organizing network, right? Because when you go and you campaign in every state, you have to cultivate a network of supporters in the state. That's part of the building of a campaign apparatus. And so that was useful for Bernie in the long term in 2016. It gave him leverage. And this time, he was losing leverage with each passing contest. He was becoming more and more marginal. Bernie is somebody who I think does want to exert maximum influence on Joe Biden. And if he continued all the way through, then he was going to have less and less influence with Joe Biden, because he was going to be seen as a pest, seen as somebody who is a disunifying force within the primary. Not unreasonably, he would have been a disunifying force. Now, you could say that it's good to be a disunifying force, but I don't think it's legitimate to deny that the function of his presence in the race would have been disunifying. I don't really care about unity. I'm just observing reality. And also, Bernie supporters don't like to admit this for some reason, or at least some don't. But Bernie campaigning all the way through in 2016 did harm Hillary. You know why? Because it hardened opposition to Hillary within the Bernie ranks. The protracted race generated, I think with very good reason, deep animosities toward Hillary, because they felt that she was screwing him over, because she did in conjunction with the DNC. Because Bernie, as the primary went on, actually did offer more and more piercing criticisms of Hillary, and they were more damaging than, say, 2008, because in 2008, the disputes between Obama and Hillary was relatively surface level. It wasn't hugely ideological, even though at the time it seemed to have significant ideological meaning, but ultimately it didn't so much. It was just a matter of slight divergences in emphasis, divergence in kind of character traits, divergence in personnel, but not hugely ideological. In 2016, the gulf between Hillary and Bernie was an ideological one. Therefore, the effect of that was long lasting and severely detrimental to Hillary. Now, I'm not blaming Bernie supporters for her loss. That's Hillary's fault. Just saying that was the outcome. They love to blame Bernie supporters as though Hillary was owed their vote, which she wasn't. But I'm saying that it's pretty clear what the effect of that protracted primary was in 2016. I don't think Bernie was willing to countenance that this time. Partially because he just has a better relationship with Joe Biden. I mean, sometimes politics just comes down to personal relationships. And if you look at Joe Biden's statement after Bernie suspended today, it was highly conciliatory, highly laudatory. I'll actually read the tweet. I know people don't believe that this statement was written by Joe Biden, which it probably wasn't, although I'm sure he authorized it in some way. Maybe they think it's just a pack of lies. But here's what Biden said. I know Bernie well. He's a good man, a great leader, and one of the most powerful voices for change in our country. And it's hard to sum up his contributions to our politics in one single tweet, so I won't try to. To Bernie and Jane, as friends from Jill and me, you haven't just run a political campaign, you've created a movement. And make no mistake about it, we believe it's a movement that is as powerful today as it was yesterday. Well, that's not true. That's a good thing for our nation in the future. Okay, that I agree. It's kind of BS. He goes on, we know how hard this is. You have put the interests of the nation and the need to defeat Donald Trump above all else. And for that, we're grateful. But we want you to know we'll be reaching out. You'll be heard by me. As you say, not me, us. And to Bernie's supporters, this is sort of the key tweet in the thread. Oops, sorry. Phone call came in. I get phone calls while my stream is going on. I thought I disabled that. Sorry. And to Bernie supporters, I know that I need to earn your votes, and I know that might take time, but I just want you to know that I see you, I hear you, and I understand the urgency of this moment. I hope you'll join us. You're more than welcome. You're needed. Okay, so that's a rhetorical departure from Hillary in 2016. At this point in 2016, Bernie and Hillary were still going at it pretty hard. Go watch the April 2016 debate in New York between Hillary and Bernie. It was heated. Okay? And now, that's over with. So I do think you're probably going to see a more kind of gainful partnership between Biden and Bernie than you did in 2016 between Hillary and Bernie. Just partially because of personal stuff, but also partially because I think Biden, and I'm not endorsing Biden, okay? I'm not supporting Biden. I don't care if you vote for Biden or not, honestly. I'm just trying to be descriptive here. I do think Biden is a little bit more of like an empty vessel in a way. So he'll incorporate whatever elements of the Democratic coalition he feels like are necessary to win the presidency, including Bernie. And he doesn't have he doesn't have the same kind of stubborn ego, I don't think, as Hillary, because Hillary had this giant network of like decades-long sycophants who thought that she knew it was best, that she had the right prescriptions, on and on and on. I just don't think that's quite the same with Biden. I mean, I guess maybe it's a little hard to encapsulate. But anyway, I don't know how you can feel betrayed by this as a Bernie supporter. Somebody just mentioned in the comments, as I actually just tweeted about this a little while ago, the easiest thing in the world that Biden could do right now to, generate a little bit more support among younger voters is to just endorse the legalization of marijuana. But if I'm assuming that's going to be a really tough ask. Hillary refused to do that in 2016. It's a total consensus view at this point. I do think you would have a fair amount of voters who would say, okay, look, I don't really care about Biden. I'm not at all enthused by him, but if he's going to he's going to legalize marijuana, fine, I'll just vote for him. There were ballot initiatives in 2016 legalizing marijuana that outperformed Hillary, with, I believe, Nevada being one example. So why not just do it? I mean, who cares? Unless you're like a diehard anti-marijuana zealot, which Biden may be. He was a drug warrior in the past, but I don't think at this point he's that passionate about it one way or another. He's passionate about becoming president, and if endorsing legalization of marijuana will advance that ambition, then I would think he would do it, but who knows? Yeah, so Bernie, look, if you're disappointed by this, I mean, I get it. I'm disappointed with the political outcomes of the past several months in general. Really, since 2016, everything's been horrible. Um, but this is who Bernie is. This is who he always said he was. So if you're shell shocked, I gotta wonder on what basis. Did you think Bernie was lying when he said over and over again since he launched his campaign that he was going to support the nominee, just like he did in 2016? You know, I feel like if you were under any illusions about Bernie's intentions, it may have been better for you to not have supported him in the first place. Because why set yourself up for betrayal? And I got totally hammered when Tulsi suspended her campaign on March 19th. Because she, like Bernie, acknowledged reality that Biden was going to be the nominee. Campaigning further was no longer tenable because of coronavirus. Her rationale was pretty much the same as Bernie's in why she suspended and endorsed Biden. Bernie effectively endorsed Biden. He said he's going to work with him as nominee. You know, whether that's a formal endorsement doesn't really matter. I'm assuming that'll come momentarily, but I regard it as an endorsement. So both Tulsi and Bernie dropped out and endorsed Biden under the same conditions. Since Tulsi dropped out and endorsed Biden, no electoral outcomes have been announced. So the situation is almost exactly the same today as it was on March 19th. Yeah, there was a Wisconsin primary tomorrow, but Bernie dropped out before the results were even announced. So the primary was over on March 17th. Tulsi endorsed on March 19th. And of course, everybody goes after Michael Tracy as the stand-in for Tulsi on social media to take out their anger because she betrayed Bernie. No, she didn't betray Bernie. She didn't endorse Biden over Bernie. She endorsed Biden over Trump. The nomination process was over, as Bernie himself has now acknowledged. So if you thought if you thought Tulsi betrayed Bernie on March 19th, then presumably you should be arguing that Bernie betrayed himself today. And if not, I don't get why. I don't get what the difference is. Because there was no change in conditions from less than 3 weeks ago, which is when Bernie did the same thing when Tulsi did the same thing that Bernie has done now. Generally speaking, what I think is going on here on a macro level is that we're reverting back to the mean in terms of American politics. I think there was a brief window of anti-establishment opportunity in 2016 where you had glimmers across the political spectrum of what a different political order could look like. And now that window's been officially slammed shut. And Trump is certainly not an avatar for anti-establishment energies anymore. He's just the vehicle for the Republican Party to advance its interests. Bernie, Trump could have governed with a heterodox agenda that was more in keeping with what he campaigned on in 2016, and he chose not to do so. He chose instead to defer to Paul Ryan, to burn his political capital on just conventional Republican initiatives like a failed Obamacare repeal and then Paul Ryan's corporate tax cuts. And since then, he's just kind of plodded along, no major accomplishments really. More funding to Israel than to his vaunted border wall. And now we're in the midst of a crisis that he totally screwed up by not listening to the more nationalistic portions of his kind of advisory orbit. If you listen to Peter Navarro and Bannon, Steve Bannon, then maybe Trump would have been guided by a recognition of the severity of the coronavirus early on rather than guided by placating the stock market, because that's clearly what was his guiding motivation and why he botched coronavirus during a critical phase in January, February, and early March. And now he's dealing with the fallout. And I don't know what the death total today is, but it's around 2,000 dead in the U.S., and that's a drastically undercounted figure because, speaking just from my own personal experience, I have an uncle who died in early March, and he was in a nursing home or an assisted living facility in Bergen County, New Jersey, which is one of the hot spots. And people in my family think that he was exhibiting COVID-19 symptoms, but he wasn't tested for it. And I don't know that he died specifically from COVID-19, because obviously he had other underlying health conditions. He was sickly, but it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest. I in fact think it's likely that that it could have exacerbated his condition and contributed to his death. So that's just one example from my family. And it wasn't a major. He was sickly, like I'm saying, so it wasn't like a tragic death. But it gives me reason to believe that the current death counts are being drastically underreported. If you look at some accounts from New York City, the rates, according to FDNY officials, fire department, of people just dying in their homes are like quintuple what the rates was for homebound morbidity a year ago. So we have nowhere near the full data in terms of the death rates. Which is all just to say, I mean, I think you're dreaming if you don't think Joe Biden has a good chance. I don't care about his cognitive condition. I agree that he's in decline. I've made videos about it. I've written articles about it. But when people say he's a dementia patient, they're being a little exaggerative, okay? He can still string together a sentence even if he has miscues and hiccups. And anyway, it doesn't matter what his personal performance is so much as the fundamentals of the election. Go look at the midterm election results in 2014. In 2014, turnout in the midterm elections plummeted to its lowest since World War II. And guess what happened in 2016? Democratic turnout was depressed. In 2018, we had the highest turnout for any midterm election since in 100 years. And guess what? That's probably going to be much to the advantage of the Democratic nominee in 2020. We've already seen signs of vastly increased turnout in the primary race. Biden did benefit from huge turnout in many states pre-coronavirus. Now, the current turnout figures are kind of useless because of coronavirus, but when everything was proceeding more or less as normal, we had massive turnout. So, yeah, the Democratic nominee is well positioned to win in 2020, and it's not going to be an anti-establishment triumph because there's no real anti-establishment candidate right now. Anyway, those are my thoughts. I'm not mad about anything. Just trying to give you the lowdown. I'm going to have a number of things out, kind of dissecting elements of the Bernie campaign failure. And believe it or not, I've kind of held back on some of my more vituperative critiques. But those will be forthcoming. Okay, so let me just check the super chats. You might have noticed that when I have guests on, I generally don't check the super chats unless otherwise stated. But maybe I will do that. But I do check them when it's just me live streaming. Okay, Natalie says she got suspended from Twitter for defending Tulsi. Sorry to hear that. Koba says, just ask Constance Dodge, why not Bolshevism? Wow. I don't even know what to say to that. Okay. Enjoy, everybody. I'll be back soon. Stay relatively safe, I guess. Enjoy being at home. Enjoy not having an expectation that you have to go anywhere. I kind of enjoy that on a perverse level. All right. Bye-bye.